Hello and welcome to episode 7 of The Actual Magician Explains, where in this video we'll be looking at the Emerald Tablet and the alchemical stages of transformation, particularly as they relate to the Western Esoteric Initiatory System. We're going to look at the grades of initiation as they are illustrated by alchemical processes. We've seen in the previous video an introduction to Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, how the Sephiroth of the tree relate to the grades and the tarot cards corresponding to the paths between them illustrate the lessons, challenges and resources that we can draw upon in our journey up the Tree of Life. We see in many alchemical texts the analogy of a gate to the mysteries, perhaps a garden or labyrinth beyond the gate. We also see illustrations involving steps or stages, hidden caves, and so forth, all of which show that the mystery is to be found in the world around us and in our interior world as well. The Emerald Tablet is a particular Hermetic text, lightly written, circa 200 to 800 AD, 1st century, but not translated until Arabic. I think some of the earliest versions of it are around the 8th to 9th centuries, and certainly not translated into Latin until the 12th to 13th centuries. But it did become an important précis or summary of Hermetic teaching. The translation that I tend to use was provided to me courtesy of Dr. Peter Forshaw from the Centre for History of Hermetic Philosophy and Related Currents from the University of Amsterdam, and this is his translation. True without falsehood, certain and most true. What is below is like what is above, and what is above is like what is below, for performing the miracles of the one thing. And as all things were from the one, by the mediation of the one, so all things were born from this one thing by adaptation. Its father is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carried it in its belly, its nurse is the earth. It is the father of all the perfection of the whole world. Its power is absolute. If it is turned into earth, you will separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, smoothly and with great cleverness. It ascends from earth into heaven, and again descends to earth, and receives the power of those things above and those below. In this way you will have the glory of the whole world. Therefore all obscurity shall flee from you. It is the strong fortitude of all fortitude, because it will overcome every subtle thing and penetrate every solid. In this way the world was created. From it there will be wonderful adaptations, of which this is the method. And so I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. What I have said concerning the operation of the sun is completed. In the Emerald Tablet we see the cornerstones, if you'll pardon the pun, of the Hermetic tradition, particularly what is below is like what is above. We've seen from our previous videos that the concept of exemplarism is fundamental to the Western Esoteric Initiatory System, particularly as I teach it. Also, we have seen how correspondence is a formative part of Western Esotericism, the correspondence of one thing to another. Within this Hermetic teaching, within the Emerald Tablet, we also see a further statement with regard to transmutation, that it is possible to transmute from one thing to another, from the gross to the subtle, from the earth to the fire, from the below to the above. In effect, we are laying out an ascent narrative and the possibility of the spiritualization of matter, of ourselves, and a return to our soul from our mundane existence. One of the interesting things I think about the Emerald Tablet and all of alchemy is that if you replace the word Philosopher's Stone or the gold or the touchstone in alchemy or the alchemist's stone with the word time, a lot of the statements made about the Philosopher's Stone or the philosopher's secret still work, that time is turned into earth, time separates out earth from fire, time ascends from earth into heaven and back again. All obscurity will flee in time. It is the strong fortitude of all fortitude. In this way, time, the world was created, and time is in effect measured by the adaptations or transmutation of all things in the arrow of time itself. So it's an interesting idea that time perhaps is one of the great secrets or mysteries that the alchemists were looking at. Now, we know that Jung wrote a lot about alchemy. We're not particularly going to touch on a lot of that in this introductory video, but it is something worth considering. Jung believed that because the chemical processes that the alchemists were observing were somewhat unknown to them, they had no other alternative but to project their own thoughts, ideas, and images into those processes, and as a result, those provide a mirror for the unconscious processes that go on inside the human psyche. So it's not that alchemy is a psychological process, but the practice of alchemy revealed a lot about the models and the relationships that our psyche has with the outside world. And as we're going to come to take a look at, we have an idea of passing through gates as we make progress up through the initiation system. As it's said by George Ripley in the Compound of Alchemy in 1470 that we are going to be using as our basic model of alchemy, you are now within the first gate of the castle where the philosophers dwell. Proceed wisely that you may win, and go through more gates of that castle. This castle is round as any bell, and gates it has yet 11 more. One is conquered, now to the second go. Again, we have this idea of a staged process of transmutation and initiation that we can map through correspondence to the initiation system. The model that I'm using from George Ripley in Compound of Alchemy from 1470 actually has 12 gates, and I'll list them first, but we're only going to take a look at the first 5. So the gates follow the process of alchemy, beginning with calcination, then solution, separation, then conjunction, and then putrefaction, congelation, cibation, sublimation, then fermentation, exaltation, multiplication, and finally the 12th gate or 12th stage, projection. It's interesting to relate this to the hero's journey, where the hero eventually returns with the elixir or the potion or the healing or the solution, and returns back to bring that learning, bring that new understanding to the first state or the first situation that they found themselves in a process of redemption. And this is the process of alchemy, where eventually when we've made the stone, we then apply that to the rest of the things in the world around us in order to exalt them, in effect multiply them and project the spiritualization that we have encountered and experienced into the world around us. So each of these states or gates can relate to the Sephiroth and to the grades of the Tree of Life. So we'll start with the first gate, which is calcination. The process of calcination is a gradual heating of a material until it's reduced to ashes or can be easily powdered. This is basically the work that Zelator does in order to gradually heat themselves up in the work that they are doing. The heating is carried out below the boiling point of the material over a long period of time. In terms of magical alchemy, this signifies the work of exhaustion that comes from the student trying many different routes of inquiry. It is a process of exhaustion, a via exhaustio, a path of exhaustion, that we practice, not one of attainment. Over time, one comes to question everything about life, the universe, the self, and it inevitably leads to a weakening of old ideas and habitual forms of perception, the ones we had as a non-initiate, and that applies a gradual heat over a long period of time to make a breakdown of the beliefs until the original sort of self or awareness or identity is exposed. It's a comprehensive purging rather than a complete breakdown. It restores, as Ripley says, a natural energy to the initiate that comes from living a life that is true to the self, not outmoded beliefs and values which have been reduced to powder, ready for the next stage, which is solution. In psychological terms, the process of calcination is likened to the initial drying out or wringing out of a person's complexes, desires, confusions in the fire of psychotherapy or self-observation, the work that they are doing. The behaviours which result in shame, guilt, anxiety are brought out to dry in order to separate them from the unconscious desires in which they have been soaked. So that brings us to the second stage, which is the process of solution. At the process of solution, the second stage of any creative process, we find that our original ideas have been loosened by the actual work that we have already done and the consequences and results of that work. It's a time when our initial ideas might have been overturned, our resolve has been weakened, and the stage of solution is best depicted by the tarot card of the moon, which relates to the grade, which relates to Yesod, and which also relates to the solution process itself. So, solution immediately following calcination, it involves the element of water applied to the results of the fire from the first process. However, like most alchemical processes, it is actually a combination of the elements, so in performing the solution, a hidden fire is actually revealed. Quite often this is depicted in illustrations by both the male figure that is surrounded by flames and the lion disgorging the sun. It's revealing this hidden fire. In psychological and magical initiatory terms, this process relating to Yesod is also related, as we said, to the moon card. It's a bitter time of self-discovery as one's own beliefs, now exposed by the calcination of self-examination, are found to be nothing more than automatic patterns, self-fulfilling prophecies, self-serving ego, a complete trap that one cannot escape oneself. The more one contemplates and analyses the mercurial solution, applying it to oneself, the worse it seems to get. Eventually, it feels like the entire self has been dissolved and there's nothing left but an empty core. On the outside, it's a fire that burns away everything, but on the inside, it is a water which dissolves all that we used to be. The process in Theoricus is perilous. It's a very difficult stage. In effect, all of the stages are difficult, and it requires great integrity and often a teacher, someone who's gone through those stages and someone who can pull you through from outside of yourself. Ripley also states the following, which to the uninitiated may sound cryptic, but if you've already started the work, you might find some meaning in this. Ripley says, "And here a secret I will disclose to you, which is the ground unto our secrets all, which if you do not know, you shall but lose thy labour and costs, both great and small. Take heed, therefore, that in error you not fall. The more your earth and the less your water be, the rather and better solution shall you see." That's to say, the more you have done with your calcination, the more ashes you will have made, the less solution you will have to go through, and the easier it will be. As one alchemist wrote, "Tie a knot of calcination." In effect, calcination accompanies us through the rest of our journey. In every single grade, we need that energy of calcination burning underneath the whole crucible, the whole furnace, the whole alembic of our alchemical transformation. Then the third stage, Ripley says, separation does not part from the other divide, the subtle from the gross, the thick from the thin. But look, you set aside manual separation, for that pertains to fools that little good do win. But in our separation, nature does not cease, making division of qualities elemental into a fifth degree, till they be turned all. This indicates that the matter is reduced into our elemental qualities at this stage. Following calcination, following solution, in separation, the material of the alchemist ourselves begins to separate out. Our fixed ideas have become broken and dissolved by analysis and experience. It's a strange time it relates to Hod and the mental undoing of ourselves, when nothing feels fixed. We do not have a single idea that we can call true anymore. And the mind is full of apparently separate ideas and perspectives. It's hard to pin anything down, and it's like oil on water. The alchemist here, the initiate, has to learn that this separation is again only part of longer work. In this grade of the Practicus, we have to have patience. It's the virtue that we've got to exercise in order to continue. It might seem like we're entering a waking sleep, or one's awareness starts to fragment into different states at different times. It's a difficult and frustrating time when we doubt we're ever going to see the big picture. But with all stages of alchemy, it's also possible to give up, admit failure, a moment before the actual result is gained. So the first two stages of alchemy, according to Ripley, as we've seen, are calcination and solution. The first described as the reduction of the matters used to a non-metallic condition. That's a breaking down through work, usually by application of gentle external heat. It's the Zelator's constant work, perhaps over a year and a day, whilst they wait to be admitted into a magical order. In Richard Cavendish's interpretation of this process, he suggests calcination stands for the purging fires of aspiration and self-discipline. The work begins with a burning discontent with oneself and one's life. Combined with a fierce determination to do better, the result is the disintegration of the self. The outer surface aspects of the personality are burned away. What is left is the powder of the inner person. This is perhaps equated to the tarot card of the Day of Judgment or the Last Judgment, which gives a illustration of the sort of issues that we need to understand and go through as we are reborn into a new life. So in separation, we see in Ripley's model these separate elements, the male and the female, the solar and the lunar, the winged and the earth. All of the elements have now become separated out. And at this point in the alchemical process, we might feel a distinct feeling of displacement and unsettlement. But we're here on the very first threshold of the major transformation that we enter into adepthood later on in the process. Because having made our separation, we can now be assured that each of the separate elements are purged and pure, and can be now recombined in the next stage of the process. As Ripley puts it, of separation the gate must thus be won, that furthermore yet you may proceed toward the gate of secret conjunction, into the inner castle, which will you lead. Do after my counsel, if you will speed. With 2 strong locks this gate is shut, as consequently you shall well know. So we have to bring the ideas together now. Bring a conjunction of ideas. It's been a constant sorting process, but now it's a mingling of the purified elements to bring them together into one whole. But this fourth stage of conjunction is often referred to as a marriage. The symbol of union is common across many Hermetic texts, often between a king and a queen. And in this fourth stage of conjunction, we have this wedding between the king and queen. However, the illustration from Ripley that we're looking at holds more secrets in the symbolism. The two-headed Janus, for example, is depicted on the top of the alchemical furnace, which we met in Calcination, the furnace of fire. This symbolises now that it's a twofold nature, both inner and outer. It may also be taken as a symbol that this work now begins to take on a life of its own, transcending our usual notions of time. You might find, as an initiate going through conjunction, going through Practicus, strange coincidences really starting to happen. You are literally starting to come together. Inside that furnace is now a secret fire, one that we have no outer experience of, which has been growing since we created it in the solution. The fire's now secret, it's within, it's not burning outside, there's no outward sign that we either show or need. The rainbow above the figure of conjunction we looked at in an earlier video as the formula of Kesheth, the formula of the bow and the bridge. It's this uniting bridge now between the powers and influences of the solar and lunar realms. Our awareness, purified and separate, yet unified with our sense of psyche, our self-reflective identity that we have created through ego process in order to make an identity and a sense of having a self. Those are now being combined as the king and queen, the sun and the moon, over the rainbow bridge itself. And then finally we have the fifth stage that we're going to look at of putrefaction. We're only going to look at this briefly because it holds a lot of the secrets of adepthood and the grade system that goes beyond the veil that is the separation between the outer and the inner order. Suffice it to say that death is merely a stage in the process, and perhaps in observing the teachings of putrefaction as we see it in this image, we might be able to gain some gleaning of what the sun at midnight might be within the initiation system itself. Often the transformative process of death is depicted in 3 or 4 phases in itself. As we saw in the previous video again, the adept has to recapitulate all of the lower grades. There's a portal sort of experience of both waiting for putrefaction to occur, the rebirth on the other side of that, and then a return to the previous grades with a whole new awareness. And as Ripley says, proceed therefore unto another wall of this strong castle of our wisdom, that at the 5th gate you may come. So in this video we briefly looked, just as a general introduction, to lay out the route map of the alchemical processes, particularly the first 5 of calcination, solution, separation, conjunction and putrefaction on the tree of life, so that we can correspond them to the grade system that the initiate goes through in the Western Esoteric Initiatory System. We've also briefly looked at the Emerald Tablet and how that lays out the possibility of a transformative process and the importance of correspondence and exemplarism, that all processes, whether they be chemical or psychological, are a reflection of the truth that is underneath all things. And so we can see that we have gone through all of these various processes in an illustration and symbolism, but as ever, and as I will leave you with for now until we return to alchemy in a future video, the worker is hidden in the workshop.